And I too was part of his design. That's proactive design work. It doesn't always have to be perfectly skewed the way you thought it was going to be. Maybe I was in his design for a reason, and I needed to be the block for him to choose differently. Maybe it was part of his divine plan. We do what we can with proactivity, with intention, and with our priorities. There are no right or wrong answers per se. It's about choosing what matters most and honoring that. That is design work. Hey, listener, welcome to episode number 115 of Listen Up. So today I sit here staring at a box that I have carried with me all of my life that has always been so special for me. It is a box carrying all of the postcards that my father sent to me throughout my life. And there are hundreds and hundreds in this box. So this month, I am diving deep into the concept of designing your life. Design July. And it occurred to me that my father has been a person who has modeled design for me in every sense of the word. I've realized that whether he called it that or didn't call it that, my father proactively and intentionally designed his own life, even though not everyone agreed with his decisions or his choices or his lifestyle. But he was okay with that. And because he modeled that for me, and because of our close relationship, his story greatly shaped who I would become. And as I've been thinking about design, it occurred to me that everyone designs their life. We all participate in the design of our life. The difference is that some of us design our life by default. Others design it by intention. Those of us that design our life by default, we usually go with whatever is happening to us at the time. We are reactive instead of proactive. We allow circumstances to dictate our next move or other people to dictate our next move. We go by other people's standards or expectations or requirements. We kind of just follow the rules or follow the path, the most comfortable path that leads us forward. But forward isn't always in the direction that you want to go. Forward is often just getting older and letting life pass you by instead of taking the wheel and deciding where you want to end up. Now, when you design your life proactively, that requires thoughts, choices, habits, and deep intention. And I know what you may be thinking. You may be thinking, yes, but Caro, there are certainly things that happen to us that are beyond our control. This is true. There are certainly things that life throws at us, plot twists and curveballs and directions that we could never have imagined. This is true. But in all of design, obstacles exist. There are laws of design, laws of gravity. There are limitations we have to work with. There are choices we have to make. There are parts we cannot change. And yet, a designer thinks around these problems, works with these problems, embraces these problems, designs anyway, creates in spite of the plot twists, in spite of the challenges, in spite of the non-changeables. That is what I want for you. I want you to make choices in your life that you feel proud of. That if you look back, you say, yeah, there were some surprises along the way. Yeah, I didn't expect that. Yeah, that was really hard. But when it's all said and done, I was proactive in designing my life. I made choices that helped me live towards my desires in pursuit of the version of myself I wanted to become. I want that most for you. And I want that for me too. And it's interesting because I have learned so much about my father and his choices. And I admire him so much. But I don't want my design to look like his. Quite the contrary, I've wanted a totally different design. And that's okay. That's what design is all about. It's about you owning the choices, the thoughts, the story that makes your life more meaningful, more purposeful, more joyful, and more uniquely yours. And it doesn't have to follow anyone else's blueprint. That's what matters most. So let me give you a little bit of context about my father. My parents divorced when I was just 2 years old. My father was many, many, many wonderful things, but one thing that he was not was a great husband. Not in his life design to be a traditional family man. So when I was about 2 years old, my mom had to make the very difficult decision of leaving him because she did not like his life design. So they got divorced. And because his work entailed traveling all of the time, he spent most of his time on an airplane. I didn't get to see him very often. I didn't have a lot of physical time with him. But despite the fact that he wanted this life, he wanted to be single and free. He wanted to travel. He wanted to work all over the world and impact lots of people. He loved the life he lived. Despite that, he had that. He also wanted one more thing. He wanted to create a meaningful relationship with his daughter. And at a time where there was no FaceTime or technology supporting, a connection from a distance, my father set out an intention to stay present in my life, even though he wasn't going to be physically present in my life. And his tool was postcards. I have a fun story for you. The very first postcard that my father ever sent me was on December 13th, 1979. I was born on December 8th, 1979. So 5 days after my birth, my father sent me my very first postcard. And what that has taught me is that my father decided proactively what his intention was going to be. And it wasn't based on my reaction or even my receiving it. I've talked to many fathers that are divorced and that travel a lot and that would love to maintain a beautiful relationship with their kids. And I've heard the same story many times. Oh, I call, but they don't answer. I have tried to create a relationship with them, but they're not really engaging. I send them cards, but they don't respond. Oftentimes we feel like things have to be reciprocal. But my father decided, as it related to me, that it wasn't about reciprocity. It was about proactivity. He would send his postcards, he would participate, and he would never give up trying. And he had no idea how I would respond. And that was okay. So, since I've been browsing through these postcards, I decided I would read you a couple just so that you can get a sense of who he was. He wrote this one in 1994. Hi, my love. I know you are in the final exams. You have made a great effort during the year and you will do great. How exciting to have worked so hard for something and see the results of your labor. Remember, all worthwhile things in life you have to work for. I love you and I miss you, Daddy. This was when I was 14. He wrote here, Hi, my love. Happy Easter. Look how pretty Chicago is. It's big, really big. I'm speaking on Tuesday at 11 a.m. to 300 meeting planners from all over. I'll do great. Someday you'll also have to showcase. This means you do a 15-minute speech with your best stuff. And if people like it, they hire you. Simple. Miss you, Daddy. This one just goes to show how wacky he is. Hi, my love. I hope everything is going fine, that your finger healed, that your psych test served as an experience. Don't go into the circus business because the midgets will grow. And don't open a hat factory because babies will be born without heads. Other than that, your luck will get better and better. Love you, Dad. He was a crazy person. But he was involved. He knew when I had a test. He knew when my finger was healed. He knew when I was getting my first job. He asked a lot of questions. He wanted to know everything about my life, and he spent his whole life telling me about his. So we had this deep connection where we really got to know each other, oftentimes through the postcards. In some of these postcards, he would write, I've called you several times and no answer. I just wanted to tell you that I love you and I miss you. So I know that there were times where maybe I didn't answer the phone or maybe I wasn't available, but he kept his intention. He kept reaching out. He never gave up on our relationship. And I have to say that I believe that you're always in training for something bigger. And my father was going to die when I was just 35 years old. And for a relationship that was quite as profound as ours, 35 felt pretty young to lose my dad, considering how much life I have to live without him. But these postcards have allowed our relationship to continue. It was almost like I was trained to have him be present with me through these postcards, and he continues to be present. Maybe that's why I don't miss him as much. I don't know. It's interesting. So it's a beautiful thing that my father sent me these postcards, and it was very meaningful in my life. But there's another side to that story. You see, I also recognize that my father chose not to be at home with me. My father chose not to prioritize a traditional family life over his desires to live the way that he wanted to live. And I also know that a lot of people judged him and criticized him for those choices. I also know that I could have received this experience differently. I learned that in 2021. And it had never even occurred to me that that was a possibility before, because you only see within your own fishbowl. So I only saw what I saw until I saw something different. In 2021, I had a woman in one of my core groups when I was hosting core challenges. And I shared this story about my father. And she later told me in confidence that she too had a mother who sent her postcards from everywhere she went. But for her, those postcards were a trigger, a source of pain. Because when she saw those postcards, she did not see a mother who loved her and wanted to maintain a beautiful relationship with her. She saw a mother who left her. She saw a mother who abandoned her. And she couldn't even look at those postcards. I had never seen that that was even a possibility. Looking back, I realize postcards were not the only sign of proactive intention my father shared with me. He also called me every single day. He surprised me a lot. He brought fun, magic, joy, spontaneity to my life. He made it a point to be present every time I asked him to. He made what was important to me important to him. So, no, I never felt abandoned, but I recognize that I could have received it that way. And that would have been a consequence my father would have had to live with. Because that is the thing. You make choices, and those choices have consequences. And sometimes those consequences aren't even what you intended, but you get to be okay with the life you have designed if you have designed it coming from the right place, if you are crystal clear on what your priorities are. There was one time where I think things could have gone differently with me and my father. I was young. I was less than 10 years old. I don't remember exactly how old I was, but my father had been working in Cargill. I don't know if you know the company Cargill. Anyway, it's a huge company. And he was the vice president, I think, of Latin America or something like that. And they were closing their headquarters here in Miami. The office that I had grown up going to be with my father at. I remember he had this little office. It was across the street from a Burger King in Coral Gables, and he would bring me to the office, and there was this little TV, and he'd put the TV on, and I would watch The Days of Our Lives. I was like 5 years old watching The Days of Our Lives, but that's a different conversation for a different day. But this office was closing, and he was going to be moved to Minneapolis. He was being offered the job in their headquarters. So he came to have a conversation with me and explain to me that he was really considering taking this job and that I didn't have anything to worry about because he would always make it a priority to come back and visit me. And I wasn't having it. I cried and I cried and I said, Dad, you don't understand. You don't live, you're never here. You're always traveling. If Miami is not your home base, I am going to lose you. I'm never going to see you. I barely see you as it is. You cannot move to Minneapolis. It cannot be your home base. When you come home, you have to come home to Miami so that we're close to each other. And I begged him not to go. And he didn't. He chose to stay. He gave up his offer. And he had to make some different choices in his career. Now, I believe that that's the best thing that ever happened to his career. That's when his motivational speaking really took off. He ended up writing books and becoming famous and doing all these incredible things. And maybe his trajectory would have been different had he chosen differently. But once again, it is design. He was designing his life with what mattered most to him. And he was willing to compromise a lot of things, aspects of our relationship, but I was a priority to him. And in that moment where he had to decide between leaving or staying, he chose me. And I too was part of his design. That's proactive design work. It doesn't always have to be perfectly skewed the way you thought it was going to be. Maybe I was in his design for a reason, and I needed to be the block for him to choose differently. Maybe it was part of his divine plan. We do what we can with proactivity, with intention, and with our priorities. There are no right or wrong answers per se. It's about choosing what matters most and honoring that. That is design work. Hey, I'm going to take a quick pause from the episode to share this with you. As an inspirational storyteller, I don't only love to speak wisdom into your heart, I also love to write to you. So every Sacred Sunday, I send a love letter to my readers. It is called the Moment of Clarity newsletter, and it is where I share stories and reflections that don't always make it onto the podcast. It's also how I live with intention in real time. I am writing to you fresh and raw every single week. So if you want that kind of wisdom in your inbox every Sunday, go to carolinedepasada.com/love letter and sign up. I will see you there. I'll share this last story about him and then we'll wrap it up. I remember when he got sick. My father was always very proactive in his own care. So he was a planner. I'm telling you, he lived with a lot of intention. So he had this big planner and he calendared everything and he never missed a doctor's appointment and he worked around his travels and he was just very organized. And he had started chemotherapy and he was very sick at this point. So we're sitting at the doctor's office. I'm there with him and the doctor is explaining how the chemotherapy is going to work and how he has to do it every couple of days. And we start looking at the dates and he takes out this big planner and he opens it up and he starts to calendar it. And he says, "Oh, doctor, the only days that I have a conflict this month are July 25th to the 29th. I'm not going to be in town those days." And the doctor looks at him and he's like, "Joaquin, you're undergoing chemotherapy. You can't travel. What are you, crazy? You can't get on a plane. Where are you going?" "Oh, I'm going to San Diego for a conference." He says, "You cannot go. You're going to have to cancel." And he says, "I'm sorry, doctor. I've been going to this conference for 29 years. I am not going to go. So we're going to have to figure something out." Now, this was the National Speakers Association. My father took me to the National Speakers Association. One of his promises that he made to me, it was 5 days that we'd spend together. I'd attend the youth program, he'd attend the main program, and then we'd come together in the evening and share what we learned and all the fun that we were having. It was the only 5 days of the year that I got to spend just with him, and we did that 13 years in a row. Now, eventually I got married. I went to law school. I got married. I had kids. My life got complicated. I could no longer go to NSA with him, but he continued the tradition and he went every year. His friends were there. It was like his family. He loved that convention. So here he is. He's very sick. He's about to undergo chemotherapy, but the trip is coming up. And for his design, that trip was a non-negotiable. He wasn't willing to miss it. So he's arguing with the doctor and he's saying, "Nope, I got to do it. You've got to figure out a way to let me get on that plane and go." He said, "I can take the red eye. I can cut the trip short, but missing it is not an option." So the doctor, seeing how serious my father was and just taking this liking to him, he loved him, opened the chemo center up on a Saturday morning when it's normally closed so that my father could have chemotherapy and leave on Saturday night on that trip. I, knowing that this was a non-negotiable for my father and that he was undergoing chemotherapy and could very well get sick on the plane or get sick while he's in San Diego, thinking this was absolutely ludicrous that he was doing this, I decided to go with him to NSA, back to a place where I grew up. It was the last time that we ever went to NSA together. It was in 2014. It was one of the most special trips of our lives. We had the best time. I don't know if my father was preparing for his death. I don't know if he realized that his time was running short, but he designed it in a way that allowed him to go. And I am so grateful that he made that decision because he was never going to go back. But he died without ever missing a trip to NSA for 29 years consecutively in a row. And I have never missed an NSA since his passing in order to honor his legacy. I now take my kids to the youth program. I've chaired the youth program. I've given back to this organization that was so important to both of us. And I'm getting ready to set out to go to NSA in just a couple weeks. And when I go through those doors, it'll be like I'm walking into my dad's living room and saying hi, seeing his friends, and enjoying his essence. That is how proactive my father was in his life. And wacky, crazy man. But he lived by his own terms and he died on his own terms with variables that, of course, he could not control. He could not control that the cancer eventually got so strong that he couldn't fight it anymore. But he designed his life even though he had cancer for 17 years. Imagine fighting cancer for 17 years and during that time writing best-selling books, traveling all over the world, walking your daughter down the aisle, seeing the birth of all your grandchildren, playing tennis 5 times a week, living your best life, reading books, attending conferences, exercising, laughing, loving, and never letting that diagnosis be the reason that you stop living until it literally knocks you off your feet and no longer allows you to continue. It had to take over before my father would lay to rest. But when he did lay to rest, he laid to rest with no regrets, with a full life lived. He died at 67 years old. And honestly, it was like he lived 100 lives in the 67 years, as fully as anyone could imagine. And of all that time, I think he probably spent 6 months in bed in the final days. It wasn't exactly 6 months, but 6 months where he was just incapable of really living it up. Short time in the scheme of 67 years of design. So now I ask you, how are you designing your life? Is it by default? Are you drifting along with the current as it takes you? Letting other people's expectations, urgencies, decisions, priorities take over yours? Or are you designing with intention? Making choices, even if they are hard choices, even if they carry consequences that you may be afraid of, but choosing with priority, with intention. I've followed in my father's footsteps in designing a life. And yet my life has been completely different to my father's. I valued things he did not value. I prioritized a lifestyle he did not prioritize. But it was by design nonetheless. I'm very proud of that. And I hope you are proud of the life you are building too. Even if it doesn't look like anyone else's. Even if when you compare on social media, you feel like somebody else's is more glamorous than yours. That's all a load of crap. Only you know if you are living a life of design. And you get to do that unapologetically, intentionally, and joyfully. I hope this episode has served you well. And if this is a topic you want to go deeper in, if this is work you are ready to integrate into your own life, and you need a little support, you need to talk it through, you need some accountability, you need some guidance, I invite you to schedule a consult with me. Let's have a conversation and see how we can help you create a life by design. The link is in my show notes. All you have to do is click on the description and schedule a consult with me. And I'd be happy to have a conversation with you and see if I can support you in some way. That's all I got for you today. Cheers to creating a life of design. And I will see you next week. That's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for being here. It means the absolute world to me. Now, if this show helps you live with a little more intention and you love it, the best way to support it is by following wherever you listen and leaving a rating or a review. That is how new listeners can find us, and it helps more than you can imagine. So until next time, keep noticing the sparks of bliss in your life. Bye for now.